Hey guys, yesterday I uploaded this image to my social network groups and thought I'd show you guys what is involved with creating this kind of image. Let's have a closer look here. There's a lot of detail in this. Now let's have a look at the Photoshop file from the beginning. I'm using three images in this. Got the sky, the Spirit of New Zealand photo, and a ship that's on fire. Now, first of all, this ship here was a lot goes involved with masking off the areas that we don't need. Now, to get a reflection on the water, it's best to use a photograph that's already got a reflection, especially with water, because it's very hard to mimic the way the waves reflect the dark and the light parts of the image of the ship. And you'll see here, put a red layer underneath so I can see how the masking is going. I've got two masks here, one on the main file, and then one on the group, just to give it a bit more opacity. How I made these selections for the masks. Again, this is one that I've used a few times on my other tutorials, is to select the color range. Now I wanted to select the dark parts. You see there it selected most of the ship. If I go shift drag, then it selects a lot more. Now I actually done, when I'd done the selection on this the first time, I'd done it in multiple versions. So I'd select the ship first, then create a mask. And on that mask, then I'd then select a different color, and then add those parts back into the mask, all the way up to mainly the mid-range tones as well. But that's when you see it selects a lot of the sky. And so from then, that's where the second mask comes in to get rid of most of those highlights. So what we're left with is just the foreground water, the ship, and the landscape in the background. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of ropes on a ship. When the selection is made and the masks are done, it does not select these all these ropes. So what I have done, you can see here, I've added in, we've kind of tidied it up a bit, and then on this mask here, you can see that I've used a 1 to 2 pixel hard brush. So let's make a hard brush, so hardness 100%, then go to about, say, 1 pixels. Now if I draw a line, you'll see that it creates kind of wonky lines. So what best way to do to create these ropes is to click where you want to start, hold down shift, and then click where you want it to finish. And that creates a straight line between those 2 points. Now once we've got that mask saved, we'll save that as an individual Photoshop file. And if we go back to the main one, that will update, because it's actually a linked file, like a smart object but linked to an individual Photoshop file. There we go. So now you can see how that ship looks. Now it's not as simple as that to just get everything looking right. Now we need something behind the masked ship layer to add a bit more depth and color. So we've got down here another version of it, but this one's just got black on there to fill in the areas that we don't want to see. So I'll slowly go through and add in the things that are done. Now I've got a filter here to darken the ship. Now all it's done to that filter is lower the exposure, no contrast, lower the highlights, lower the shadows, lower the blacks, and the saturation. Now, merging a daytime photograph with nighttime can be very hard. Most people forget that they need to desaturate that image to make it blend in a lot nicer, because there's not much color in a nighttime photograph. Cancel that. Now I've again put another mask here. If I do a selection there, it's mostly these lighter parts here. You can start to see that come to life. Now the sky itself is another smart object. Again here, so I've just got two brightness contrast layers on there to add a bit of oomph to the sky. And that is again reflected in the ocean here. So you can see the stars there. And that again has some other effects added to it. Now this layer here is just to add a bit of colour to the water. And then there's also a reflection in there for the fog. Now I'm just going to go through and add these layers one by one. So this one's to darken up the landscape there. This one is to add a little bit of colour, so gradient map, and then masked out. So you can see there, that's the colours that are going through light to darks. And then I've just masked out an area where the lamp, because there's two little guys with lamps in there. So there's a reflection of one lamp, bit of saturation. It's done to the red, so change the hue there. Curves adjustment, it's quite a big change there, just to try and darken everything up, and then adding a bit of colour to the sails of the ship. And then here's the reflections of the lamps. Next thing I added was some fog. The biggest thing about creating a composite is getting the sky to match on the horizon. Best practice would be to shoot a night sky with a horizon, because there's usually a bit of clouds there, so that would blend in a lot more naturally. But since this is a full sky, I've added a bit of a distraction from that area, which is fog. And to create this fog, that was just simply a brushed in like a grey sort of colour, then added a bit of noise to it. If I create a black background, so you can see there, bit of detail in there. Close that. And of course, adding a little bit of glow around where my little guy's lamp is going to be. So it adds a bit of colour to the fog, because fog's always going to diffract off, the light's always going to diffract off the fog. So we've got to try and keep that looking as real as possible. And of course we add more glow, and that's the little lamp that we've got here. So I've mimicked a diffraction spike from when you stop down your aperture, you get these spikes, and this is essentially a recreation of that. So you can see there. And then just duplicated that to create the top lamp here. Now there is a guy on the mast behind the sail there, so that's where I've put that. And of course every pirate ship needs a flag. So there's a little flag there, so that's actually a mast flag. And next layer is a bit more glow. So because the light is quite bright, it's going to reflect off the fog there. And then of course we need a reflection to mimic that light source. And then we just added a boat that was on fire. Now this again is masked in a similar way using the colour selection tool. and then I used the pen tool to create a shape of the ship, because the ship is nondescript with that image, and then added in that shape. Then added a bit of, if we go have a look at more of the details there, so actually slight desaturation on them. You can see -32 and a bit of colour change. These curves here is to lift the shadows to have the foreground of that blend in a bit better. So that's what it used to look like. Then more curves to have the ship blend in better. And then of course adding a little bit of smoke, reflecting the glow of that flame. Just add a bit more to it. So those are all the layers that we used in this image. But you can see we've still got these stars reflecting in the water, which I don't really want to be that sharp. I want it to be kind of blended. If it was this case with such nice flat water, that would reflect, but getting the reflections right on this would be very, very hard. So I've added a Gaussian blur and motion blur to the water there to kind of just give it a bit of a washed out effect and to less distraction. So we want the focus to be on this sort of area here, then leading down to the ship that's on fire. Now that's everything that I've done in Photoshop. So I've kept all the colours relatively neutral, the sky is looking normal, everything on the ship is how it should be. Now I'll save that and then bring that photograph into Lightroom. Now in Lightroom, I wanted to bring it up a little bit more, so I add about 0.95 of exposure. I reduce the whites a little bit, up the clarity. Clarity is a really good one to bring out the details of the Milky Way. Reduce saturation only a touch. Adjust the curves, so I'm crushing the whites a bit and lifting the blacks, because there's actually no blacks in nature, so it's always like about 95 to 98% black. And add a bit more saturation to the reds, oranges and yellows. I haven't changed any luminance or hue, just saturation. Add a little bit of split toning. So what that does, it adds a bit of colour to the highlights and colour to the shadows. Keep that as it was. Sharpening, add a bit of sharpening. Don't want to go too crazy. With the sharpening, it's always good, especially with the Milky Way, is to add masking. What masking does is it only sharpens the edges of anything that's got contrast. So if I reduce that sharpening, it's just going to sharpen the noise. So I'm going to keep that around 75, 80, so it gives a nice smooth outlook. I'm not adding any noise reduction to this. What a lot of people do when they combine an image that's shot at 100 ISO and an image that's shot at say 6400 ISO, one's got grain and one will not. That is really noticeable. So what I tend to do is add grain, add noise to match. I'm doing it overall because I've already done noise reduction on the sky photo. So I'm just adding noise on the whole image so it blends in nicely. So it does look like it's actually shot at night time, even though it wasn't. And then of course add a little bit of vignetting around the outside using highlight priority. So that's how it was. So a little bit darker. Now I'm pretty happy with this, but I still want to add a little bit more pizzazz, I guess, into the oranges of the fire in the foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'll export this as another Photoshop file, because the actual size of this file is 1.87 gigabytes. So I'll open up that Photoshop file. Now all I've done here is I've added a gradient map. This gradient map consists of these colors here. And what that does, so this is the lighter end of the spectrum, so anything that's white or really light will be yellow. Anything that's near black will be a maroony red, then to red for the darker midtones, and then an orange for the midtones. So you can see here before, after. There it's done a nice gradient, a gradual transition between that and the sky. And then that saves in and opens up in Lightroom, and that completes how this image was created. The total time it took to do this was around 3 hours. A lot of it was messing around and figuring out the best way to do what I wanted to achieve. Because you always start with a vision, but that always changes when you start to manipulate those images, and if it's not quite working, then try something else. Well, I hope you enjoyed looking into this file. I hope you learnt something. Any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks.